The conference room on the 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle had a view of Puget Sound that probably cost someone a lot of money to look at every day. I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at my aunt sitting across the mahogany table from me, and she was smiling in the way people smile when they think they already know how something ends. She had no idea how it ended. Let me go back. I was 19 when my parents sat me down at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in late October. My mom had made spaghetti, which I remember because there was still a pot on the stove and the smell of garlic bread was in the air, and I kept thinking, after everything that happened next, that I would never be able to eat garlic bread again without my chest tightening. My dad spoke first. He said they'd been thinking about it for a long time. He said things weren't working out financially. He said my aunt, my mom's older sister, had a bigger house in Portland and more stability, and it made more sense for me to go stay with her while I finished my last year of high school. He said all of this the way someone reads off a grocery list. I looked at my mom. She was looking at the table. I asked if they were serious. My dad said yes. I asked when. He said the end of the week. I asked what I'd done wrong, and my mom finally looked up and said, "Honey, it's not about you," which is the most brutal thing a parent can say to a child they are giving away because it means they looked at you and made a calculation and decided the number didn't work. My aunt wasn't cruel. I want to be clear about that. She picked me up on a Friday afternoon in her green Subaru with a travel mug of coffee in the cup holder and a box of granola bars on the passenger seat, and she said, "I've got a room for you with a real bed, and you can paint it whatever color you want." She was practical and steady, and she made sure I ate dinner every night and got to school on time. But she had her own life, her own kids, younger than me. 2 boys who thought I was a strange visitor from another planet. She worked long hours at a logistics company. She was kind, but she was not my mother. And every evening when I sat at her dinner table, I felt the specific grief of someone who has been misplaced. I graduated high school in June. My parents sent a card. No return address. I enrolled at the University of Washington on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs. I waitressed on weekends at a diner near campus, where the owner, a woman in her late 60s named Vera, made the best pie in the Pacific Northwest and absolutely did not tolerate nonsense from either customers or staff. I liked that about her. She didn't pretend things were softer than they were. My second year of college, I switched my major to accounting. I was good with numbers in a way that surprised even me. There was something clean about a balance sheet, the way every figure had to answer for itself, the way you couldn't hide anything in the end. Vera noticed. She started asking me to help with her quarterly bookkeeping, paying me extra in cash and pie, and I started to understand that a small business's finances could tell you everything about the health of the thing. What was being neglected? What was growing? Where the rot was starting? It was at a weekend accounting workshop during my junior year that I met my great-uncle. He was the kind of man who didn't announce himself. He sat in the back of the room during the morning session in a gray wool blazer and asked one question, very quietly, that made the presenter pause for a full 3 seconds before answering. After the session, he introduced himself. He said he'd heard I was Vera's girl. I said I worked for Vera. He said, "Same thing in her world." He smiled. His name was Walter, and he was my grandmother's youngest brother, which made him family in the technical sense but also essentially a stranger. I had met him once as a child at a Christmas gathering, and remembered nothing except that he was quiet and that my mom had said, on the drive home, that he'd made something of himself. He had, as it turned out, made quite a lot of himself. He had spent 40 years building a regional supply chain consulting firm that served clients across the Pacific Northwest. Not flashy, not famous, but the kind of business that compounds quietly, year after year, like a savings account no one bothers to touch. He asked if I'd be interested in interning during the summer. He said he'd seen my questions during the session and I had a way of thinking about problems that interested him. I said yes. That summer changed my life. Not because of any single dramatic moment, but because of the accumulation of small lessons that Walter delivered without fanfare, usually while looking at something else. A spreadsheet, a window, a cup of coffee going cold. He taught me how to read a contract for what it didn't say. He taught me that the most important number in any negotiation was the one neither party had written down yet. He taught me that people who are lying tend to look at flat surfaces, tables, floors, their own hands, instead of at faces. He told me once, on a drive back from a client meeting in Tacoma, that his own family had not understood what he was building for the first 20 years. He said they had called it stubborn and risky and probably failing. He said he had learned to stop explaining himself to people who had already decided what they thought of him. I understood what he was telling me without understanding it fully yet. I graduated with honors. Walter offered me a full-time position. I took it, and over the next 6 years I worked my way from junior analyst to senior consultant to, eventually, a minority partnership stake, 30% of the firm, earned through performance and documented in a contract that Walter's attorney had drafted with meticulous precision. I bought a small condo in Capitol Hill. I got a cat named after a mathematician. I had friends and a life I had built, from the particular kind of nothing that comes from having your parents hand you to someone else, like an inconvenient problem. I did not hear from my parents. Then Walter got sick. It was pancreatic cancer, found late, the way it almost always is. He was 71 and he faced it with the same quiet steadiness he brought to everything else. He updated his estate documents. He had conversations with his attorney. He called me into his office one afternoon in March and said he wanted me to know that he considered the last 6 years some of the most professionally satisfying of his life, and that he was proud of me, and that I should not let anyone tell me I hadn't earned what I had. I cried in my car for 40 minutes after that meeting. He passed away in September on a Tuesday, which I also remember because I had been planning to bring him coffee cake from the bakery near his house, and I never got to. The attorney scheduled the formal reading of the estate for 6 weeks later. It was a formality. Mostly, Walter had walked me through the broad outlines of what he intended. My 30% partnership was already legally mine. The estate covered his personal assets separately, the house in Bellevue, a portfolio of investments, some property in eastern Washington. I did not know my parents had been invited. I arrived at the attorney's office on a Thursday morning in November, the 14th floor. The view of Puget Sound. I walked into the conference room, and there they were, sitting on one side of the table with a man I didn't recognize between them. Their own attorney, it turned out, whom they had retained in advance. My mom was wearing a blazer I'd never seen before. My dad had a yellow legal pad in front of him with notes already written on it. My mom looked up when I walked in and said, "Oh, sweetheart, isn't this something?" She said it the way someone says it when they want to imply a shared experience, a bond, a history of warmth that we did not have. I sat down across from them. I did not say sweetheart back. Walter's attorney, a careful, measured man named Mr. Calloway, opened the meeting and began. The firm's assets, including my partnership stake, were addressed first. That was straightforward and already settled. Then the personal estate. The house and eastern Washington property were to be placed in a charitable trust benefiting a youth housing nonprofit that Walter had supported for years. That didn't surprise me. He had talked about it. What surprised my parents, based on the way my aunt's jaw shifted, was that there was nothing in that part for them. The investment portfolio, roughly $4.2 million, was to be distributed as follows. 70% to me. The remaining 30% to 3 specific nonprofits Walter had supported over the decades, divided equally. My aunt's attorney leaned forward and said there must be some error. My dad put his hand flat on the yellow legal pad. My mom said very quietly, "We're family." Walter always said, "Family came first." Mr. Calloway waited for a moment before continuing. He said Walter had anticipated this response. He said there was a codicil. The codicil stated that any challenge to the distribution of the estate, any legal contest, any claim of undue influence, any petition for modification, would trigger an automatic reallocation of the full investment portfolio to the charitable recipients. All of it. No exceptions. He also said, and this was the part I hadn't known, that the codicil included a detailed written statement from Walter explaining his reasoning. It was 3 pages long. Mr. Calloway did not read it aloud, but he slid a copy across the table to my parents' attorney. My aunt picked it up before her attorney could. I watched her face as she read it. I don't know exactly what was in it. I received my own copy later. But I know that Walter was precise and thorough, and that he had been watching my family for a very long time. Her face, when she finished reading, was completely still. The smile was gone. My dad said this was outrageous. My parents' attorney said they would review their options. I said nothing. I looked at the view of the Sound, the gray water, the distant hills, and I thought about the night I was 19 years old and my mom looked at the kitchen table instead of at me. The meeting ended. I took the elevator down alone. I thought that was the end of it. 3 weeks later, I came home on a Wednesday evening to find a message on my building's intercom. My parents had come to my address. I still don't know how they got it, and asked the front desk to call up. I didn't buzz them in. I called my attorney instead. She advised me to document everything and said that if they returned, I should call the police. I applied for a protective order the following week, citing the pattern of contact after I had made clear I did not want communication. It was granted. I thought that was really the end of it. It wasn't. On a Saturday morning in January, my building's security system sent an alert to my phone. The system had cameras at the main entrance and the side gate that leads to the parking garage. I opened the app and saw the footage. My parents standing at the side gate, my dad holding the gate open with his foot while my mom slipped through. They had gotten through the gate because a resident had held it open without checking who was behind them. I called the police. I had the security footage, the timestamps, the protective order number. Officers arrived within 20 minutes. My parents were still in the parking garage when they got there. Apparently they had been trying to find my parking spot, my car, some point of contact that I hadn't thought to protect. They were cited for violating the protective order. Their attorney contacted mine the following week with language about misunderstandings and family and grief over Walter's passing. My attorney responded with documentation. I haven't heard from them since. I think about Walter a lot. I think about the drive back from Tacoma. The way he said he'd learned to stop explaining himself to people who had already decided. I think about the 3-page statement he left behind. The one he wrote knowing he wouldn't be there to defend it, knowing it might be challenged, knowing that some people would read it and still not understand. He understood something I was still learning when I met him, that family is not a claim you file on someone else's life. It's not a default you can invoke after years of silence. It's a thing you do actively, every day, in small moments that don't feel significant until you add them all up. My aunt drove me to my first college orientation when my parents didn't come. She didn't say anything about it. She just showed up in the green Subaru at 7 in the morning with the travel mug and the granola bars, and she drove me across the bridge and helped me find the registration building, and she said, "You're going to be fine," and she hugged me, and she left. That's what I mean. Walter gave me a career, yes. He gave me financial security and professional knowledge and a partnership stake in something real. But the thing he actually gave me, the thing he wrote down in 3 pages and left behind so I would have it after he was gone, was the evidence that I was worth showing up for. The investment came through in February, after the estate was fully settled. I spent 2 weeks not quite believing the number in my account. Then I called Vera, who was semi-retired by then, and letting her daughter run the diner, and I asked if she wanted a business partner because I thought the pie deserved a second location. She laughed for a long time. Then she said yes. We're opening in Fremont in the spring. The lease is signed, the permits are in. I picked a paint color for the walls. A deep, particular green, the color of the Subaru, which I never told my aunt was the reason I chose it, though I think she probably knows. Some debts you pay quietly, over time, in the particular currency of showing up. I keep coming back to the spaghetti. Not the conference room, not the estate number, not the security footage of my parents slipping through the parking garage gate like they had any right to be there. Just the spaghetti on the stove and the smell of garlic bread and my mom looking at the table instead of at me. I was 19. They had run out of room for me in their calculations, so they passed me to someone else and called it practical. And the strange thing, the thing I didn't understand for years, is that what they did wasn't some explosion of cruelty. It was quiet. It was a Tuesday evening, and a pot on the stove, and a decision they had apparently already made before they sat down. That kind of quiet abandonment takes a long time to name. What I've come to understand is that actions don't disappear. They don't evaporate just because time passes or circumstances change. The choices my parents made when I was 19 to prioritize their own comfort over their own child were still present in that conference room 15 years later, sitting right there at the table with them, invisible to everyone except the attorney reading Walter's words aloud. Walter had seen it clearly. He had watched for years, said nothing publicly, and then wrote it all down in 3 careful pages. That's the thing about integrity. The real kind, not the performed kind. It doesn't require an audience. Walter spent 40 years building something honest and solid without asking anyone to applaud him for it. He paid attention. He kept his word. He made his decisions based on what he actually observed, not on what it would have been easier or more comfortable to believe. When it came time to put his intentions on paper, he had 40 years of evidence to draw from. The document wrote itself. And Walter didn't just model that for me. He trained me in it, slowly, on drives back from client meetings and over cold coffee and in the margins of spreadsheets. He taught me that rigor isn't a personality trait. It's a practice, that you get sharper by doing the work honestly, every day, especially when no one is grading you. I was a waitress who was good with numbers when he found me. He treated that as a foundation worth building on, and that decision, that specific act of seeing someone clearly and investing in what was actually there, changed the entire trajectory of my life. And then there's the part that I think matters most. The part that's hardest to explain without sounding like a greeting card. I didn't quit. That sounds simple. It isn't. There were semesters where I worked double shifts and studied at the diner counter after close. There were years in the firm where I was the youngest person in the room, and the only woman, and I had to decide, over and over again, whether to shrink or to stay. I stayed, not because I was exceptional, but because Vera made me pie, and Walter asked good questions, and my aunt showed up in a green Subaru at 7 in the morning without being asked. The people who show up change the math. They don't erase what was taken from you. Nothing does that. But they add enough weight on the other side that the whole thing stops tipping in the wrong direction. My parents walked into that conference room expecting a windfall from a man they had barely known and never honored. They walked out with nothing, and then they drove to my building and tried to find my car, as though proximity to my vehicle would give them some claim on my life. It didn't. It just gave me footage. The diner in Fremont opens in spring. Vera picked the pie flavors. I picked the green walls. Some things compound quietly, year after year, until one day you look up and realize you built something real. Not from what you were given, but from what you refused to let go of.